Side Out with Dave, and sadly no Mecky today. I'm on my own. He's travelling, and that's not a problem. That's why we have two. Count them, 1, 2. Two hosts on Shiny Side Out, and I'd like to thank Solaris for the kind words. Also, you know, this show is broadcast from Australia, live from Australia for Revolution Radio on www.revolution.radio, where it's more than just good old classical FM transmissions. So jump into the chat room. You can chat to us while we're on air. And this is show number 389. And Mecky would say, I'd pass that to Mecky at this point, if you're unfamiliar with the show, as 980 and 300. That's the way he used to count. I like it. It's on air, online, and on your smart device. So grab an app. Grab an app to listen from anywhere on your smart device. It's pretty cool. I actually use it while I'm driving. It's not bad. I've got an app that does that. I can listen to Revolution Radio in Australia while I'm driving. I just love that ability to do this stuff. It doesn't matter where you are anymore, on the planet or even on the ISS. Or at one point there, I did notice that our website was being visited by a USS naval vessel in the middle of the Pacific, which is pretty groovy. Good on you, whoever you were who was listening to it. Thank you very much. Let's hope it's not the captain. Maybe it's just, one of the cleaners or one of the cooks. I don't know. Don't know who it was, but I'm only imagining. It'd be nice if it was a fighter pilot who was just listening to it, while he's flying around. But I don't think so. I have to say, I caught Solaris' show again. I don't get to listen to it very often. I'm very busy. Come in, maybe an hour, even a half an hour before the show, and read through the notes and all the correspondence between Mecky and I, and then we, midweek we're looking at emails that come in to us. Thank you very much for all those people who post. We can't do all of your ideas, by the way, but we're either in the midst of doing one, but we'll let you know. You just let us know what you'd like to hear, and we'll or research, and we'll get back to you on it. Thank you very much. So Solaris' show tonight, she had Tessa Dick with a co-host of Willie Miranda, and Tessa was talking about Philip K. Dick, and it was a good show. There was a lot of a three-way banter thing going on there, which is really interesting. Always a great show. Now, if you don't know when Mecky and I talk about the previous host on the station, Solaris, it's Solaris Blue Raven. She has a couple of shows. One is on Revolution Radio, and if you don't know who she is, we ask that you do you research and find out who she is and where she is and how you can get access to the archives. Now, there's one way. If you are on Revolution Radio's archives, you can just go to her archive and download the latest show. It's in MP3 format, if anyone can remember what it used to be before we had streaming media. And you can download that in your own leisure. Let's just call it podcasting, right? If you like. There's a podcast available. Solaris always has a great show, and she does, as usual, live up to her high standard of quality shows. So thank you very much. But to get access to the Revolution Radio archives, for me, it cost me, because I do this, it's $5.95. That does change because the exchange rate varies so much. An Australian dollar has tanked. Oh my goodness. It's, I think, 68 cents now for an American dollar. No, now the other way around. Oh, never mind. You know what I mean. So it's $1 Australian dollar to 68 American cents. And we've got to pay heaps more. Look, it never was that way. I think it's just the way that everything's balancing out. And since it's going down in respect to the American dollar, that means we're in Australia either doing extremely poorly with our finances, or the American, the country, America, is doing really well. I don't know. You have to make the call. I suppose it depends on who you believe is doing the good. I don't believe it's Australia. I believe that the US is bounding back, whatever that means, because we're completely in a recession, but the people at the top have their head in the sand and refuse to make the announcement. We have a number of consecutive, I believe it's only meant to be 2 consecutive reports of a downturn, and that's officially a recession. But no one's willing to call it, and while I think we're at 1% or something like that with our interest rate, they're planning on 2 more reductions in that, and doing like a quarter of a point every time, 0.25. And we've just had another fall in our interest rates, which is good for me because, I've got a large mortgage. I mean, everyone in Australia has really large mortgages. The price of getting a unit or a flat or an apartment, they're all the same things, is very high. If you're in a city, doesn't really matter where you are, and if it's brand new, then you could be above $1 million. If you're trying to buy just a house, second-hand house, a house that isn't even that good, but because of enough people are coming and buying into our country from elsewhere, which we have very little rules upon, then the house prices are, 1.5, 2 million. So from a first home buyer's kind of point of view, it's almost unreachable. Almost. And if our market goes down 10%, it doesn't make it cost effective yet. And no one holding any mortgage is willing to want it to go down any more than that. But, I've got 50% equity, I think, in my house, and a large mortgage. And I have to work till I'm probably 79 or 80 just to pay my house off. And I think I'll be giving my house as an inheritance, my mortgage as an inheritance to my children. It's sort of like in Singapore. In Singapore, they do the same thing. They have a 99-year mortgage, not a 30-year lending rate, but they have a 99-year one, and they expect 3 generations basically to be paying it off. So whoever's currently employed are the ones who are doing it. So the aged, no, the young, no, but the people in the middle. And as their children grow up, they're going to be contributing towards these loans, because the houses in Singapore, for instance, are so extremely expensive that, 10, 30 million, whatever, right? That no one can reasonably decide that they're going to pay it off. But when you think about the interest rate, the compound interest rate is supposed to earn the bank the same value as the property over the life of the loan, for instance. Yeah. So 5% or 7% loan, which you can't claim in Australia anyway, unless it's an investment property, which not your primary residence, then you can't claim that. And if it wasn't your primary residence, you're only doing it for the equity. So you would get a loan, just for instance, you would get a loan based on the equity on your current property or your ability to pay the loan off. You'd buy a second property, but interest only. And so if you were to sell it, you're only going to profit the difference between the purchase price and the sale price. That's your actual profit, and that's your equity. And you'd be paying eternally for an interest-only loan, because it's only a loan based on the value of the property at the time of purchase. So you'd be nuts to remortgage that at any time in the future, because the land prices continually go up. And in Australia, it was typically double every 10 years was the calculation had been used up until about 2010. it's not always that, but over long term, like, 100 years going back, that's the trend. And look, that's why I think they call it a property ladder, and you're supposed to get multiple properties and continue buying up, and once you're in, then you're good. But right now, there's little new housing changing hands, and the poor people who are not the poor people, but I feel sorry for those people who can't afford to get into the property market, and the young people today, I mean, not young, but the young people, the 19s and 20-year-olds, are happy just paying rent. So it's sort of like, I don't know, like maybe like I keep thinking about New York as an example, where it's impossible to buy into that property unless you're extremely wealthy, and you just expect to rent. Like in Europe, you just expect to rent. You don't expect to buy anything because no one's going to give it up, unless it's a deceased property or something, and then there's 100 vultures on it. Anyway, I'd like to continue our entry. We acknowledge, and you know what? I'm going to say this at the end of this, right? I got some grief on this. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Where I live, it's the dark and young. And where Meki lives, it's the Daruk people. And we pay our respects. We do pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. In the future case, it is purely because if someone listens to this in the future and they happen to be an elder of, a native custodian of land, we would like to honour our promise to respect you. We still do. They're not going to go to war and fight us. They looked after the land in every country, in every way possible, better than we're doing it. And we're just plundering our damned world. Trust me on that. Only for profit. That's what we're doing it for. And the people doing it do not care. And let us remember that everything that we've built will get ground off at ground level. Ground off. I mean, pushed into the ocean if it glaciates again through another massive meteor impact. All of the things we've done will be forgotten and gone. Maybe they'll find some old abandoned railway tunnels that didn't get ground off. And they'll go, wow, there must have been civilization here before us. This new civilization that's risen up. But hopefully in the midterm between that, there were people living off the land who respected it and its creatures. All right. So looking back, if you were to look back at all of the time that we've been responsible for the planet, and in the last 200 years, we've seen the loss of more than 80% of the creatures on the planet through our misadventures or irresponsible looking after the planet. Yeah. And the last time you see the massive die-off, we just presumed it was a huge impact or there was, some awful event that happened. It could have just been, think about it this way, another civilization that sprung up. Hey, newsflash, we're not the first technologically advanced civilization on the planet. Anyway, so in Australia alone, 240,000 generations of people looked after it before we have. And in the 6 generations that it's been under our control, decimated it, right? Cut everything down, dug everything up, built cities and clogged the waterways, dammed the rivers. We've done things for our own interest and not for the interest of wildlife and not for the interest in the long term for the planet. Clearly, it's not for the planet. And I'm sure if you want to argue with me, I'll happily take that offline with you. And I'd love to be able to see you successfully win that argument. Good luck. Anyway, moving on. It is only me today, and I'm not trying to bring everyone down. That's not my plan. There was some news items that I wanted to bring up, and I would bring up with Mecky if he were here, and that's a shame that he's not. But there's some really large events currently happening on the planet, and I think that we should really take note of those. The first one being the one who has the highest amount of effect are the fires. The fires currently raging out of control, and there is a rise of more than 84% upon last year. It's only 20% upon the year before, but then it sharply diminishes the extent of the fires for year on year going backwards. So it's an exponential curve except for 2 years ago. That's like a little bit of a blip. This is much, much bigger now. Now, they've said that there are a certain amount of those fires which have been lightning driven. That's fine. Don't have a complaint about that. And they would normally burn themselves out. It wouldn't care. But then if it was only lightning driven, there wouldn't be the extent of fires, because the other ones at other times have also been lightning driven and human driven. However, this is an extremely dangerous point of the planet, and I'm just going to say the fires do they cause carbon dioxide. That's fine. Don't care. That's fine. And we could use, maybe this is a big plan. Maybe this is a plan of the elites or something, right? To do two things, right? Let's make the planet cooler. How can we do it? What's the biggest piece of planet that we can just set on fire? Oh, the Amazon. Yeah, good. Let's do that, right? Brazil, are you in? No. Bolivia, what about you? No, not really. Okay, we have companies working in those deforesting. That's fine too, because other plants will grow and eventually, but we're talking about animal habitats. That's the thing that I was talking about earlier, where we don't care about the animals. We don't care. No one cares at all, right? If there's $1 to be made, screw the animals. So, screw the lives of the animals. Don't actually don't have misadventures with the animals on a personal nature. There's 75,000 separate fires. Now that's an effort. That's all I'm going to say. That's some effort. Thanks, Dirt. I'll look into that one. So it's an effort to light 75,000 fires. That's an incredible amount. It is hugely increased. It's 84% on last year, so that's nearly 100%. So last year there was, let's just say, greater than half of that. So maybe 45,000 fires. These are started by people because they want to clear the land. And cutting stuff down just takes effort, right? You can basically raise it to the ground by setting it on fire. Hey, there's an idea. And what's the net result? Well, we could plant something instead of whatever those nasty plants that were there and all the wildlife that was inhabiting it. Who cares? But that doesn't matter anymore. We can plant the thing we want, like palm oil, palm trees. We can do that. But it is Bolivia, and it is in Brazil. But the record numbers of fires are burning across the Brazilian Amazon rainforest, for instance, and Bolivia, igniting an international row between France and Brazil over the need for action. There's a New Scientist article about that exact phrase. Record Amazon rainforest fires spark row between Brazil and France. You should look that up. What I'll do, I'll paste the actual link into the chat room. That's a responsible action from a host on Revolution Radio. But it's not the only set of fires. Where else is burning? Anyone? Bueller. Anyone? Well, it's Siberia. And that's burning for 3 months so far. and it continues to burn, and there's 12 million acres burnt. There's Alaskan fires. Don't think it's, isolated to Siberia or Brazil or Bolivia, but it's also Alaska as well. Now, we in Australia, we have fires, and the fires of the First Nation people, or the Australian Aboriginals. The fires they cleared certain sections of their jurisdiction, which were greatly varied in size and terrain, but they burnt what they knew would clear the land and allow them to be able to hunt in the coming period of time. So between 3 and 5 years were, from memory, right, were the periods of time, like rotational cropping. So you'd plant a crop, grow it, and then you would plant a secondary crop, not the same kind of food the first time, but another one which you would maybe till into the soil to bring back some of the nutrients into the soil. And then you would move from one, between each one of these seasons, you would move to another plot of land and do that in a rotation. Well, the native Australians were doing the same thing. They were burning large tracts, not enormous, but large, within their jurisdiction. And they were burning them, so it was grassland, and they would clear it of basically most of the deadly creatures. And then as it regrew, the safe creatures would move in, and then they'd be able to hunt those, but it was on a rotational thing, and they were looking after the land and looking after themselves, and also looking after those creatures, because the safe creatures would move in, the deadly ones would move away or be killed in the fire. And we're talking, in Australia, we have, out of the top 10, deadly snakes, we have 9 of them. And then you've got the spiders, and we have 2 in, I think, the top 5 are Australian for deadly humans. Even though you can tell me, and people argue blue in the face to me, that the funnel web and the redback spiders don't kill anyone anymore. And that's only because of the anti-venin, but that's not true that they don't kill people. Some people have been recently killed by them, and even though they were taken to hospital and given anti-venin, they still died. So the fire in Brazil do not hold a candle compared to their fires in Africa. Yes, there's fires in Africa as well. Thank you very much, Stardust Man. The fires in Africa, the ones that were originally set by the native inhabitants, were done at a particular time of year, for instance, as were in Australia, by the way, which would send up a plume of dust at a particular time of year. Only this works, which would result in the air, the dust being a seed for cloud creation, which then would result in a rain, and it would storm and provide the water, the fresh water that the people needed, right? So yeah, Lady Horse is right. Hey, Lady Horse, I haven't seen you for, oh my goodness, I think last week or the week before was the first time I've seen you in years, because of our shift and your availability. It's really good to see you in the chat room. Thank you very much. You're absolutely right. They are the lungs of the world. And it's very important that we remember this. I think it was 20%. It wasn't. It's not terribly big. I'm going to do some quick Googling before I say the rest of that phrase. But the Amazon forest lungs, right? So from the lungs of the Earth perspective, there was an amount of percent of the world's ability to consume carbon dioxide. Yeah, 20%. I was absolutely right. Look at that from memory, right? Yeah, so the Amazon rainforest consumes 20%, or basically is contributing 20% of all of the sources of oxygen on our planet. So, of all of them, it's 20%, 1/5 it creates of our planet's oxygen. Yep, absolutely. So, where's the rest come from? Well, there is plankton in the ocean, which creates oxygen as well, believe it or not. It's a thing. And, Australia has a lot of forests still and plants. Every plant is doing it. Every plant on the planet is doing it. But from a single point of view, it's 20% in the Amazon. Well, what about Alaska? Well, it doesn't have as much sunlight, and Siberia, for that matter, even less sunlight. So the plants there tend to be tundra, where there's shorter, tougher, more hardy plants that can live through it. Not the high growth frequency of a rainforest environment kind of plant. Now you're thinking it's turning that much carbon into material. So it's extracting the carbon from the air and the ground, and it's able to turn that into, it's rematerializing it, I suppose, or transitioning it from an airborne chemical into a physical solid structure for itself. That's how plants grow. That's really capturing that carbon. Now, think about this for a minute, right? So we've got 20%. That's a fifth. If you were to, maybe get pneumonia, hands up, I've had it. That's where, if you don't know what pneumonia is, it's your lungs are trying to fight something, but they produce a liquid, and you're drowning pretty much in your own, internally. So your ability to take in oxygen is hugely reduced, and it can be fatal. You can just drown in your, oh, it's awful. I'm just going to say it's really, really terrible. So, and I have a smile on my face while I'm saying it, because I recovered from it, and it's happened a couple of times in my life. I've suffered from, I've acquired some terrible. It can be on its own a virus, or it can be attributed to having another virus and then having contact or a poor immunity, and it's one of the your body's defenses. But drying your lungs out is a really hard task for your body, especially if you're not well. So it can be fatal. Having said that, one question that came to mind, and I want you guys in the chat room to talk about this, or just give me your impression of it. What would you say if I said Agenda 21 and the lungs of the earth? Can you make a connection there? Can you? Is it something that you guys are willing to do for me? Is write in like a yes or a no. Yes, if you believe that this might be an Agenda 21 connected way of being able to reduce life on the planet by just burning everything. I mean, literally burning everything. Everything that's currently on fire is in a combination of natural and man-made causes. And do you think there would be a connection with large corporates being able to do this, or the elite for some manner or reason or rhyme, or maybe it is Agenda 21, maybe something else? I've got an absolutely there from one of our people in the chat room. Thank you very much. I'd been thinking about this long and hard. 3 months in Siberia. 3 months. Siberian fires. 12 million acres are gone. In Australia this year, I'm going to guess that we're going to see some really severe fires. Right now, the paradise, absolutely. It's not going to be paradise for us, but for the elites maybe. In Australia, I told you that the native inhabitants, the First Nation people, the Australian Aboriginals, were burning sections And that's fine, sections in their jurisdiction, and they didn't burn anything greater than that, and they only burnt them at certain times of year when it was going to be put out naturally and never go out of control that the whole of Australia was on fire, right? Now, we've, as a people living in that environment here in Australia, we've realised that we also have to burn what we can, because if we don't, it generates so much fuel that the next time there is a fire, it's so out of control and crazy, and we should, it's at great risk to our lives. So around Sydney today, there's so many fires doing exactly the same thing. I'm not going to say blanketing out the sun like you might find that in those, news stories from Brazil. But when Australia has, a serious fire outbreak, the sun is gone. It's just a pale dot through the smoke that you can, you barely feel any energy from the sun. It's like living in perpetual nighttime. Right? And of all the videos that I've been watching, because one of my friends, a great friend of the show, by the way, one of my friends rang up, and we chatted for a while, and I said, what's going on in your life? And I'll get back to the story in a minute. And he said, concerned, I've got major concerns about the stability of geopolitical conversations at the moment. And I said, I completely agree, absolutely completely agree with you on the instability and the how disappointed I am in the inability for our governments to behave themselves, right? Because, in all honesty, right, if we all just stayed in our rooms and did what we wanted for ourselves, and, multinationalism, companies, large organizations couldn't have multiple footprints. If we did that, our exports would go up, hopefully we'd all be happy within ourselves, and we'd have our own single economies, and it might be a better place. We're trying to claw back some manufacturing that we've given to other countries because we realise that there's no money in not doing it ourselves. And I think I've given that example about 100 times, and this is show 389, so yeah, probably, where if each of us listening right now, and those of you who are going to listen to this in the archives or on YouTube later, just want to give you an example. So if all of us have a market stall at a market, and it could be a car boot sale, right? But each of us listening has our own method of selling, and we're selling things that we've made. So we've sourced the materials ourselves, we've made them ourselves, put all the effort in ourselves, and then we've sold the item for a profit, for an amount which seems reasonable enough for the effort that we've put in, and we get all of that money. That's great. Woohoo! Get money. I like money. It's the system we live in, and it's what I told my kids. You better learn how to deal with money, because it's the game we play. So we do all that, and then down the row is someone that approaches you and they say, look, I've got a market stall here. I make a really similar product. So what if I make your products as well as mine, and you can buy them from me and then sell them just for the profit you would make. Okay. And they make then more money than you do, and you only make the profit. But you didn't have to do anything to get that. It seems really easy. But then in the long run, you realize that you don't have as much money as you used to, and maybe the quality control isn't there, and all the sad things that happen, right? And the people that survive from you and your profits can no longer survive from you and your profits. And they've got a downturn. And in the end, I'm not paying any taxes for the amount of manufacturing that's going on, and I'm just hoping on and living from them. Yeah, and they're making all the money. Now, if they approached everyone in that market, for instance, to do the same thing, they would make all the money. And all we make is this measly little bit. It's only our margin that we're making, right? However, that margin, we had a larger margin before, and yes, it took us effort, but you know what? We supported a larger community of people around us. So, just saying. So, if you're a country and you're not doing that, and if you're offshoring everything, then effectively you're coring your country to survive purely on the existence of another, and that doesn't work in the long run. It does not. All of the unsuccessful countries are having problems with the IMF because they can't pay their loans and they're not making the money. And you end up with what's called a trade imbalance, where your exports are less and less and less and less because the people who are making your product are doing the exporting. And the more things you export and the less things you buy from others, the better your trade balance. That means your money isn't going offshore. The moment everyone else is making all the things for you, your money is going everywhere else but you, and then that changes your exchange rate. You've got to understand that it is all connected. So the moment it starts to look like it's going to be heaps easy, we can do all this thing and we don't have to spend all this money, well then you're basically coring your entire country. And we've all seen this. Now, whether that's also an agenda item, or maybe it's just a clever business strategy from another country, let's call it a state actor, who's decided that they're going to bankrupt all of us, and core our countries so they can make all the profit and then come just walking straight in. Let's just do that. That'd be great. Yeah, we'll get them to agree to it too. They'll ask us to do it. That's how stupid we all are. And we all lapped it up, and it's where we live. Now, I want to move on from the fires, because yes, it's terrible, and there's a lot of talk in the chat room here. The fires in populated areas are used as flooding to herd us through de-insurance into stacked housing, as we see in Judge Dredd. Great examples, and I agree with you. And I think there's a lot to do that's let out through Hollywood, through movies, through writers who have seen this. There's a lot of clever people out there who are putting this into text, and they're putting it into movies. They're putting it into places, trying to tell people what's going on. You know, They Live, great movie. Mackie would be here right now and talking about it, because it really is an amazing movie. And it's a thing, and they saw it, and we're living it, and not all of us get it. I was on the train the other day. I have a 2-hour commute to work on a train. And I was sitting there, and I remember the time that everyone had newspaper in their hands. And they were reading. And the ambient light was such that you could read very well. It was nice environment. The papers were so large you had to fold it twice just to have it only in front of you. Crazy. And it was an art in being able to unfold it, fold it, and fold it again so that you're on your next bit that you had to read. Extraordinary thing, right? Anyway, a lot of fun. Hello to me and my eye in the chat room. Now, on the train, there's no newspapers at all. None. Even though I think they still exist. I haven't seen them anywhere. Magazines are dying art. But people are buried in their phones. They're buried. They don't even look outside or do anything. And they're either watching something they've downloaded or streamed, because there's not enough continuous transmission ability for any internet connectivity for my 2-hour commute for us to reliably stream something the entire way. You know, there's massive tunnels that go for a while, and then you pop out somewhere, and there's no rail provided internet link, so it's all independent. Each device has to independently seek its own internet. And there's no service offered by them where you can watch a movie and pay $1 or something, right? There's none of those agreements. So yeah, it's a little disappointing. However, what I noticed was that people didn't look up, they weren't looking around, they're just buried in the device, personally examining their lives and connecting themselves to, I think Facebook is it has a lot to answer for, I think, and it's a really tough ask someone not to check their phone. And I'm guilty of it. The first thing I do in the morning is as I'm opening my eyes, I've grabbed my phone and I'm looking on Facebook. I know I'm extremely connected to the online. My online presence is really what I'm connected to. I don't get the disappointment as much because I don't post very much, except for either. I'll friend you if you send me a link, request. A lot of political stuff. I do a lot of jokes. And I do some cute animal things. So I think that mix for me keeps me a little balanced. But I've noticed that a lot of people who I know that I follow I don't get very many of their things anymore. Facebook has decided on its own that it's going to filter my life to the life it's giving me. And that life that I feel that I'm being filtered in towards it just makes me happy. I think the phones today may very well have the ability to sense your, not adrenal gland, the other one. Oh, what's that chemical that you produce when you're happy? If someone's liked something, woo, you get a little buzz from that, and that's what you're seeking every time you touch your phone. Every time you look down through the list of things and you're selecting something that hopefully in your mind is going to have your friends like it too. It's no different than having a conversation with people. I'm going to put it out. I'm going to put it out there straight away. If there's three of you in a conversation and the conversation is naturally progressing through, maybe they're either funny anecdotes or their stories or their observations or their things in people's lives, you all contribute to that story. And if you do that successfully, that story will evolve and become its own thing. And it's bigger than the people now involved in it, and it'll have a natural progression. And it might be that you can't continue it. That's just what happens, right? Your time constraints. I've got to get back to work. Sorry, guys. And you're at the water cooler, right? You go, okay, well, I'm done. I'm done now. Hey, look, I'll see you maybe for lunch, yeah? And they go, yeah. And maybe you can continue it. But your phone, it does this thing. It's bigger than that. And it crosses all barriers. And language is now, it's irrelevant. I've got some friends in other countries, and I can't speak their language at all, just saying. But I've set it up so it automatically translates it. Hey, SJ, by the way, welcome aboard. It automatically translates it, and it translates it when they've typed it. And I can send them a message in English, and it turns it back into their language. And I think that's truly amazing. Now I'm conversing with people that I would never have previously had the ability to do. I like that, but I know, and I've spoken to people who work in. Though I'm not going to say where they work, but they work in a place where they are steering people into a life using social media, on all the platforms. It's not isolated, the one that I formerly mentioned. I'll just be careful of what I say, because otherwise, whoop, there you go. We get banned again, or our videos don't go out. But then there's a thing that's now let's not call it an AI. It's currently just an algorithm, which it's like an equation, right? That's all it is. It's just if you hit a threshold, it does this. That's all it is. Just some rules, and those rules will allow you to see things or not allow you to see things, and it's my belief so far that there's an ability for them to steer you into a person or a personality that you weren't currently driving towards. So if it's a parent holding a bicycle, stopping you from falling off on the first ride you've ever taken on a bicycle, that's the kind of thing, and they sort of guiding you. But it's not that. What it is like a control of the steering, and steering you, not touching it, down a road, round a corner, up a hill, down around, and taking you where they want to put you. And that's the real thing that's going on. That's the actual result of their equations or the algorithms or their intent. So it's also my belief that they could turn you into somebody for their own pleasure. right, for their own doing. For maybe if it was a 3-letter agency, they could make you the sharpshooter. I believe that's a thing that could happen. I'm not saying it is happening. I don't want to be accused of it. It's only my thoughts, but certainly there is something in that, and you wouldn't have to be abducted by a van on the side of the road, with a hood over you and put into like a prison cell and fed psychotics, and then brainwashed, and then fed a code word for you to enable you to take out a public figure, for instance. I'm just saying, as we might have seen in a movie or something like that. And that's the traditional 3-letter agency way that we've seen it in the media, that you can be brainwashed and then turned into a sleeper against your will, and you're not even aware that you're doing it during the act. Well, it's my belief that they could use social media to do the same thing today. They're absolutely, completely convinced that that's a thing, because all the same tools are available to us, but we've made ourselves think that we're doing it, and we're unaware of it as well. Just real quick, I was reading a news story, because I've only got 4 minutes before the top of the hour, and there's a legend, and I'm researching this at the moment. There's a legend of Bigfoot bodies found at Mount St. Helens back in 1980 when that blast went off. Now, I'm researching. It's just the tip of the iceberg right here, right? And I just want you to know that it's a thing, and I'm actually looking into it, and hopefully more comes about after this research. But I don't want it to just be a National Enquirer story, and that's gone through several iterations in different media platforms and then ended up almost untraceable back to them. But I'm using some tools that allow me to do that. Just letting you know, both Meki and I work in IT. We work in that field. We work with big data. We work with a lot of large companies, and those companies know of this tech, right? Of being able to not just time machine something, but be able to find every instance of it on the net. North Korea again, with 3 minutes left. North Korea fire more missiles. This time they tested it from a multi-missile launching truck-y kind of thing. So like a multiple missile launcher truck. So they're obviously getting shown some equipment, or they have some equipment that one of their suppliers is wanting to sell them, and are saying, look, we'll do this thing, we'll have the test, and let us know what's going on. Would you like some more of them? It's a natural thing that people do, and if you've got some old kit lying around, you might have done some upgrades and want to go test it again. I don't blame them from doing missile tests, or most countries are doing missile tests. Let's not, beat around the bush. People are doing it. Just, do you want them to do it, and do you want them to do it with nukes on the tips of the missiles? Probably not. Hong Kong protests. I should have spent a lot more time on this, and I don't want to. What I want to do is get back into the actual show notes at the end of this, after the top of the hour. But 10 weeks in, and if you're still wondering what it's about, the current topic, which is never mentioned in the media, is anti-fake news. So the people are currently protesting that their government is issuing news which isn't even real. And those people don't want it. And they don't want that anymore, because their government is, just basically selling propaganda. I mean, all of them. If only they knew, right, that all the other media outlets are doing exactly the same thing, just tearing off the old Reuters feed and reading that out verbatim. And that's the end of that. That's just what they do. I want someone, if you can, in that room, to let me know the moment the music has started. And I'll be 30 seconds behind. So the moment you tell me, I'll be able to end it, right? I wanted to bring this up in the last minute. The Catholic Church, is it really relevant today, in today's society? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's still not quite the control mechanism it used to be. But I've got to line this up with what's going on. We just had, George Pell, his, what was it called? He claimed, what's it called? I forget. He claimed that he was not guilty of the crime. He's already been appeal. So his appeal was denied. he claimed he wasn't guilty of those sex allegations. And people in Australia are isolated to it, and they don't know that it's happening in every country. But maybe it would happen at a particular time and it was more prevalent, and maybe it's not happening today. I don't know. But that raises a question: is it still valid in today's society, and can they survive all of these allegations? If you put them all together in a big pile, it's a big pile. And the last one, right before I get an announcement that the music started, is 6 people were hit by lightning watching the PGA Golf Tour. Thanks, SJ. I'll wrap it up for this. It's a short break. See you after it, talking about Megalithic Builders.
Listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent.
Welcome back. You're back. And I think I'm still going. Yep. You're back with David Mackey's Shiny Side Out on freedomslips.com, on the #1 listener-supported talk radio on the net. So push the donate button or subscribe to the archives for only $5 a month. It cost me $5.95 with the exchange rate. Welcome aboard. If you're a new listener, we're glad you are with us, and we hope the journey is an easy one. It's nice to chat with the people in the chat room. Also, thanks SJ, because of my delay. It's difficult to time that really well. We're glad you're on board, like I said. So whether you follow, subscribe, or otherwise, let's make it something. Get in contact with us. Message us on any of the platforms, and voice your view. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. We're halfway through show number 389. If Mecky were here, I'd pass it to him, and he would say 980 and 300. And we're talking about megalithic builders. And so if you don't know what the format of the show is like, we normally do this thing where we talk for the first hour about local matters or current matters, and then we go into the show notes itself. And this one has 60 pages of show notes. So every one of our shows has an extraordinary amount. It's not the longest. 82, I think, was the longest that we have. So, I really swear that I'd written that in. I've got to be careful that I don't repeat anything from the last one. I think this was the one. I don't think we've spoken about... Actually, maybe we have. Goodness me. I'll get to it in a minute. So, for those people in the chat room, RD47, me, not myself, but a person named me. There's My Eye, New World Order, Stardust Man, myself, Narara. I live in Narara, by the way. There's Boots, Dirt, and Nighthawk, Lady Horse, SJ, Comet, Jer Bear, May ST139, Amiga Logos, etc. Now, sorry, Sunflower looks like hasn't typed anything for a while. Now, Nighthawk, I believe, is on his way home again. I saw a message recently about that, so that's good news. Prayers and good thoughts for your Nighthawk. He's the station owner, and he provides this platform for all of the hosts to be able to communicate with their audience. I mean, it's really about you, the audience. It's not about us. It's about you guys. And without you, we're nothing. We have no voice. And we really do appreciate that you are with us. That's Mecky and I, Shiny Side Out. If, like I said earlier, and I said at the top of the show also, and that is, if you would like to communicate with us, find any platform. We have a website as well, shinysideout.net, I think it is, or .com.au. It's the same place. Just go there. Just Google it, Shiny Side Out. There's one word and you'll find us. Now, we research what people ask for. We also have our own interests and investigative channels. We do work really hard. It's difficult with the jobs that we both have. We then have high demands of 50 or 60 hours a week. We try to have a balance, and we've both got families, and it's tough. So expect us at least a couple of days turnaround to better get reply to you. If it's about a show topic, we may not reply. We might, or just say, thank you. We'll look into it, or we've done a show on it. But I do ask that you type your topic next to Shiny Side Out as a search on your preferred search platform, and see if we've already spoken about it, because we might have. We don't want you to tie your time up in something or a belief that we can't or have not done it when we actually have. It saves a bit of conversation. Do your research and find out. Now, so that's thanking everyone that's currently with us. If you've just joined us or you've found us in whatever method it is, honestly, if on request, we'll provide some show notes that aren't published, but we're still working on updating the website, so we'll have all of the prior show notes. We keep them all, and we're working towards putting them into a. Now we also have all the links, by the way, every single link that we talk about, everything and all the sources. We keep the source material, and so if you're looking to try and do some research into something, you may be hard pressed to discover more than we've discovered, because there's two of us working towards this, and Mackie does a lot of the research. My goodness, So, just saying, it's really important that you keep on top of your research. Now, we also attempt really, just from background, we attempt to avoid as much confirmation bias as possible. That's where you only research the thing that supports your topic. We do have a number of piles that we have to look through. When you do any research, of course, don't just look for the things that support your idea, but look for the things that counter it, and then try to counter the argument. And if they null themselves out, then move on. Right? If it just makes sense, I hope that makes sense. It's a natural thing that you should do. Oh, Hawk is home. Well done, Hawk. Love to you and your family too, by the way. One day, we won't just be in Australia. We'll come and visit and say hello. We want to do that sooner than later, and we're just waiting for the opportunity to be able to do that with you. We'd like to do that. There was like a Christmas party or a party that you had one year that we were so sorry that we weren't able to attend, but we will make that up and see you and see the team at Revolution Radio. It'd be great. Okay, so I'm not sure. I've been looking through these notes, and I can't confirm that we haven't already spoken about it, but I'm really quite concerned. In the chat room, if you'd like me to continue doing Megalithic Builders, say MB. If you'd like me to talk about news topics instead, or something else, say other, and I'll take the vote. I just want to be careful that I don't mention something we've already mentioned. When I'm looking at the text, it appears entirely as though we haven't said this part. Right, it's only can't be page 3, surely. Oh, it's difficult. It really is difficult. I don't want to get in trouble from Mackie. I'm sure we've spoken about. Thank you very much. I will. So, Göbekli Tepe is one of both Mackie and I's most quoted sites after Pumapunku. Pumapunku is its own special place, still unknown, and Göbekli Tepe is not separated from the unknown. It's still in the unknown pile, but it's an early stone complex, and it's in eastern Turkey. At a number of sites in southeastern Turkey, ceremonial complexes with large T-shaped megalithic orthostats, which are uprights. We don't know what sat on top of them, or if they sat on their own, or if they became part of a wooden complex holding up some other structure. We don't know, because that's not there. It's just these vertical T-shaped objects made of stone with themselves carvings on the outside. Now, dating, because of the difficulty in dating, if we date the surrounding material, that's called relative dating, and the pre-pottery Neolithic between, say, 9600 to 7000 BC have been discovered around those sites. And at the most famous of these sites, the Göbekli Tepe, parts of the oldest level have been carbon-14 dated, relative dated, because you cannot date the stone. The stone can only be dated from the time it became stone, not from when you cut it. So, unless there's a patina on it, which you could estimate the patina's ability to grow, but that would only be from the last time it wasn't irradiated by ultraviolet light and killed or whatever, right? So, the C14 dated as far back as the mid-10th millennium, so 10,000 years BC. On this level, 20 great stone circles up to 20 metres in diameter with standing stones up to 7 metres high have been identified. Now, if you're not familiar with it, just Google the word Göbekli Tepe and Tepe, and you'll know what we're talking about. At least 5 of these circles have so far, this is 2019, have been excavated so far, right? Yeah, thanks for that, my eye. Awesome. Many of the standing stones are richly ornamented with carved reliefs. And there's bears, boars, snakes, foxes, wildcats, aurochs, gazelles, quadruped reptiles, like crocodiles, for that matter, and lizards, birds, spiders, insects, quadrupeds, and scorpions are all the kinds of creatures that have been carved into them. And many other animals. In addition, some of the stones are carved in low profile with stylized human features, arms, hands, loincloths, but no heads. On the younger level, rectangular structures with smaller megaliths have been excavated in the surrounding area. Several village sites incorporating elements similar to those of Göbekli Tepe have been identified. 4 of these have Göbekli Tepe's characteristic T-shaped standing stones, though only one of them, that's Navali Kori, has so far been excavated. The other ones have been discovered on, ground penetrating. Göbekli Tepe itself, no traces of habitation have so far been found, nor any trace of agriculture or cultivated plants. Though bones of wild animals and traces of wild edible plants, along with many grinding stones, have been unearthed, it is thus assumed that these structures, which have been characterized as the first known ceremonial architecture, were erected by hunter-gatherers. That's Göbekli Tepe's oldest structures are about 7,000 years older than Stonehenge megaliths, for instance, and it is doubtful that any of European megaliths' traditions are derived from them. Just going to say, while that's the official text, there is no corroborating evidence to suggest that they weren't, and that there's no confirmation bias to say that they were hunter-gatherers. We don't know who built them. It's got to say it's an unknown. All the author has said here is that at the time we were only supposed to be hunter-gatherers, so they must have built it. That's all they're saying, right? To understand the text and how that author was attempting to try and place this in our timeline. Now, our timeline is guesses, because we have no clue. And, just like the pyramids, you say to an Egyptian, hey, and I'm not getting Egyptians offside here, by the way, I'm just saying, hey, did you build them? Sure we did. Can you build another one? No, we forgot. We forgot how to build them. Don't know. Well, it must have been really complicated. Yeah, sure it was. How'd you move this stone that was 10,000 tons? Don't know. Right, so it appears as though they might have been there, and the people have claimed to have built it, and making a claim that hunter-gatherers built these elaborate stone rings, well, rings of uprights with carvings of all of these creatures that didn't all occur in that area. It's a little weird. It's a little bit of a leap. It's just as much as a leap as saying it was aliens that came and built it. But the question still remains. It appears to have been intentionally covered up. So intentionally, it was covered up before the stupid humans who were just crawling out of the gutter, right? So that we didn't discover it immediately. I don't know. I'm making that bit up too. But it says, as silly to suggest that it was hunter-gatherers, that we ourselves in our own history built it. Dolmens, this is Middle Eastern megaliths. Dolmens and standing stones have been found in large areas of the Middle East, starting at the Turkish border in the north of Syria, close to Aleppo, southwards down to Yemen, for instance. These can be encountered in Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Israel, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. The largest concentrations of these can be found in southern Syria, along with the Jordan Rift Valley. However, they are being threatened with destruction as people begin to habitate those areas. They date from the late, that's Chalcolithic, as in charcoal, Chalcolithic, or the early Bronze Age. And we discussed the age periods of time last week. Megaliths have also been found in Karg Island and Purasmian in Iran and Barda Balka in Iraq. The most concentrated occurrence of dolmens in particular is in a large area on both sides of the Jordan Rift Valley, with greater predominance on the eastern side. They occur first and foremost on the Golan Heights, the Haran, and in Jordan, which probably has the largest concentration of dolmens in the Middle East. In Saudi Arabia, though, only very few dolmens have been identified so far in the Hijaz. They seem, however, to re-emerge in Yemen in small numbers, and thus could indicate a continuous tradition related to those Somalia and Ethiopians. The standing stone has a very ancient tradition in the Middle East, dating back from the Mesopotamian times. Although not always megalithic, in the true sense, they occur throughout the Orient and can reach 5 meters or more in some cases, such as the Ada in Jordan. The phenomenon can also be traced through many passages from the Old Testament, such as those related to Jacob and the grandson of Abraham, who poured oil over the stone that he erected after his famous dream in which angels climbed to heaven. That's from Genesis 28:10 through 22. Mackie and I do want you not to forget the religious texts, and specifically both the Book of Enoch and the Bible, because of the historical nature of them as a recording mechanism. Jacob is also described as putting up stones at other occasions, whereas Moses erected 12 pillars symbolizing the tribes of Israel. The tradition of venerating or standing the stones continued in Nabatean times and is reflected in, for example, the Islamic rituals surrounding the Kaaba and nearby pillars related phenomena such as cup holes or rock cut tombs and circles also occur in the Middle East. That's the Middle East. Now, African megaliths, for instance, the Nabta Playa at the southwest corner of the western Egyptian desert was once a large lake in Nubian Desert. Located 500 miles south of modern-day Cairo, By the 5th millennium BC, the peoples in Nabta Playa had fashioned an astronomical device that accurately marks the summer solstice. Findings indicate that the region was occupied by only seasonal, likely only in the summer when the local lake filled with water for grazing cattle. There are other megalithic stone circles in the southwestern desert. Also, Namora Tunga, a group of megaliths dated 300 BC, so this is getting to more recent times rather than 10,000 or 5,000 in the last paragraph. These dated 300 BC. It was used by the Cushitic-speaking people as an alignment with a star system tuned to a lunar calendar of 354 days. It's pretty good, isn't it? This discovery was made by B. N. Lynch and L. H. Robbins of Michigan State University. Additionally, Tiva in central Ethiopia has a number of old megaliths. Some of these ancient structures feature engravings, and the area is a World Heritage Site. Megaliths are also found within the Valley of Marvels in the East Haraji area. That's in Africa. There are, I think it's called rings in South Africa, and there's more than, I think the current estimate is 15 to 20 million stone rings. And I don't mean like a ring that you can put on your finger. I mean a large enough ring that could be like a room or a habitation of some kind, but with no doorway. Very unusual. And all the stones in those rings have like a unique property around them or about them, which if you were to strike it with another stone or a piece of metal, it would ring like a bell, for instance. It gives off an elongated tonal sound, a harmonic. And they're called, oddly enough, ring stones. So if you find one of these rocks that isn't in one of those stone circly kind of things, which, like a walls, rounded domicile kind of walls, like without any windows or doors, but most of them are filled in with debris, like sand or dirt, or maybe when a flood occurred, the sediments had filled them. But there's between 15 and 20 million in South Africa. But so the ring stones have their own property, and they're called ring stones because the stones they found associated with the building of these rings all have the same property. Whew. All right. Asian megaliths. If you didn't know, there's tons of them. So megalithic burials are found in Northeast and Southeast Asia. They are found mainly in the Korean peninsula, though. They are also found in the my pronunciation is going to be terrible. So, Liaoning, Shandong, and Zhejiang in China, the east coast of Taiwan, Kushi, Shikoku in Japan, also the Dong Nai province in Vietnam and South Asia. Some living megalithic traditions are found on the island of Sumba and Nias in Indonesia. So throughout the entire Asian population, current population. The greatest concentration of megalithic burials is in Korea. Archaeologists estimate there are some 15 to 100,000 southern megaliths in the Korean peninsula alone. Typical estimates hover around the 30,000 mark for the entire peninsula, which in itself constitutes some 40% of the dolmens worldwide. That's an effort right there. In East Asia, Northeast Asian megalithic traditions originated in Northeast China, in particular the Lao River Basin. The practice of erecting megalithic burials spread quickly from the Lao River Basin into the Korean peninsula, where the structure of megaliths is geographically and chronologically distinct. So as the place changes and the time in which they did it, they're consistent amongst the times, or different amongst the times and the places. The earliest megalithic burials are called northern or table style because of their feature of an above-ground burial chamber formed by heavy stone slabs that form a rectangular cyst. An oversized capstone is placed over the stone slab burial chamber, giving the appearance of a tabletop. These megalithic burials date back to the early part of the Moonun pottery period, which is about 1500 BC to 850 BC, and are distributed, with few exceptions, north of the Han River. Few northern-style megaliths in northeast China contain grave goods, such as bronze daggers and stuff like that, prompting stone archaeologists to interpret the burials as graves of chiefs or preeminent individuals. However, whether as a result of grave robbery or intentional mortuary behaviour, the northern megaliths contain no grave goods. That's interesting. I mean, you have to lift the stone up and keep it up and then be able to nick the stuff out of it and close it back up if it was really worth anything, But if they're just talking about some daggers, I mean, who cares, right? It's not like a car I saw today who had a jewel in the back window, on the backside window of the driver's side, which people were breaking the window to get the jewel. There's a guy talking to me about that today. Representations of, this is the southern style now, representation of dagger and two human figures, one of which is kneeling, carved into the capstone of a megalithic burial. This is number 5 in the Orum-dong, Yusu in Korea. Southern style megalithic burials are distributed in the southern Korean peninsula. It is thought that most of them date to the latter part of the early Munum or to the middle Mun, it's M-U-M-U-N, Mumun period. Southern style megaliths are typically smaller in scale than northern megaliths. The internment area of the southern megaliths has an underground burial chamber made of earth or lined with thin stone slabs, like it's a more efficient way of doing it rather than standing it up with a stone box. That makes sense? A massive capstone is placed over the interment area and is supported by smaller propping stones. Most of the megalithic burials in the Korean peninsula are of the southern type. As with northern megaliths, southern examples contain few, if any, artifacts. However, a small number of megalithic burials contain fine red burnished pottery, bronze daggers, polished ground stone daggers, and greenstone ornaments. Southern megalithic burials are often found in groups, spread out in lines that are parallel with the direction of streams. Megalithic cemeteries contain burials that are linked together by low stone platforms made from large river cobbles. Broken red burnished pottery that's found and charred wood found on these platforms has led archaeologists to hypothesize that these platforms were sometimes used for ceremonies and rituals. The capstones of many southern megaliths have cup mark carvings. A small number of capstones have human dagger representations as well. Wow. Well, let's talk about the capstones. What styles are they? These megaliths are distinguished from other types of the presence of a burial shaft, sometimes up to 4 meters in depth, which is lined with large cobbles. A large capstone is placed over the burial shaft with propping stones, as in the southern style. Capstone style megaliths are the most monumental type of Korean in the Korean peninsula, and they are primarily distributed near or on the south coast of Korea. It seems that most of these burials date to the latter part of the middle Mumun, which is 700 BC to 550 BC. And they may have been built into the early part of the late Mumun. An example is found near modern Changwon at Deokcheonni, where a small cemetery contained a capstone burial. This is number one, with a massive rectangularly shaped stone and earthen platform. Archaeologists were not able to recover the entire feature, but the low platform was at least 56 by 18 meters in size. So just think meters to yards. So say 56 yards by 18 yards in size. That's huge. And that's one stone. Good luck with that. As I'm known to say very, very often. Hi, jam artist there, or jam artist in the chat room. Southeast Asia, living megalithic culture of Indonesia. People of Nias Island in Indonesia move a megalith, and this is from 1915, and it's been digitally restored. The article. The Indonesian archipelago is the host of Austronesian megalith cultures, both past and present. Living megalithic cultures can be found on Nias Island, an isolated island off the western coast of North Sumatra. The Batak people in the interior of northern Sumatra, on Sumbiar Island also in East Nusa Tenggara. There you go, Tanagra. Didn't even know that was a human place. And also Terraria people from the interior of the South Sulawesi. These megalithic cultures remain preserved, isolated and undisturbed well into the 19th century. Several megalithic sites and structures are also found across Indonesia. The menhirs, the dolmens, stone tablets, and ancestral stone statues were discovered in various sites in Java, Sumatra, Sulawesi, and the Lesser Sunda Islands. And so it appears that they're found everywhere. Megaliths in South Asia are dated before 3000 BC, with recent findings dating back to 5000 BC in southern India. Megaliths are found in almost all parts of South Asia. There is also a broad time evolution with the megaliths in central India. Sorry, just checking the time, and the upper Indus Valley, where the oldest megaliths are found, while those in the east are of much later date. A large fraction of these are assumed to be associated with burial or post-burial rituals, including memorials for those whose remains may or may not be available. The case example is that of the Brahmargiri. My pronunciation's terrible, by the way. Apologies. Which was excavated by Wheeler in 1975 and helped establish the culture sequence in South Indian prehistory. Because we don't listen to the Mahabharata or any of those other stories, we want to find it out, in reality. But they tend to line up. However, there is another distinct class of megaliths that do not seem to be associated with burials. In South Asia, megaliths of all kinds are noted. These vary from menhirs, or rock-cut burial, chamber tomb, dolmens, stone alignment, stone circles, and anthropomorphic figures. These are broadly classified into two potentially overlapping classes of the Mortai, 1994 and 2008, the sepulchral, containing remains of the dead, or memorial stones where mortal remains along with funerary objects are placed, and non-sepulchral, including large patterned placements of stones over a wide area. So you can see there's different kinds of styles of this. The non-sepulchral type is associated with the with astronomy and cosmology in South Asia and in other parts of the world, the Menon and the Vahai. You think of like Stonehenge. That's the same kind of thing. Astronomy is associated or assumed. In the context of prehistoric anthropomorphic figures in India, Ray Howe, 1988 and 1999, Uphinder Singh in 2008 made reference. Note that it is unclear what these giant anthropomorphs symbolize. They don't actually know what they mean. They haven't discovered a meaning for those. But they say they usually occur in association with megalithic monuments and are located in megalithic burial grounds and may have been connected with ancestor worship. I got to tell you, right, every time someone finds something, they have to try to make it a religious thing. It's like, imagine right now, just right now, if you uncovered something in your backyard, doesn't matter what it is, some kind of rock or something, and someone says, oh, that's a religious thing. You go, how is it religious? Don't know yet, but we're just going to say that. It seems to have the most weight and allows us to get our grant to go and dig it up. I'm just making that bit up. I really don't know. But it can't all be religious. Yeah, burial, absolutely. There might be some kind of something around it. Maybe there might be a thing you did, or a dance you did, or a place like it was where people collected together to maybe celebrate. But it doesn't have to be religious every single time. Where I live in the South Pacific, the Melanesian megaliths, there are some there as well. So megaliths occur in many parts of Melanesia, mainly the Milne Bay province in Fiji and Vanuatu. I've been to both of those places. I haven't seen any megaliths that I've been aware that I've been looking at. Few excavations have been made and little is known about the structures. The megalithic tomb Otuyam in Kirawina has been dated to approximately 2,000 years old, which means around the time of 0 year. But there wasn't 0. It was... never mind. Which indicates that the megaliths are an old custom in Melanesia, not Micronesia in particular. However, few megaliths have been dated. The construction have been used for many different rituals. For example, tombs, sacrifices, and rituals of fecundity, dance sites. Hey, I was right. Dance sites exist next to some megaliths as well. So they would get together and just party, like a party place. In some places in Melanesia, rituals are continued to be held at the sacred megalith sites. The fact that the beliefs are alive is a reason that most excavations have been stopped at the sites. They don't want to interfere, clearly, with tradition. I mean, that would be awful, wouldn't it? Imagine you're having a celebration and someone says, we have to dig the building up to find out when it was built. Yeah, I can tell. I got my hand out. I can tell you when it was built. Some time ago. How's that? Is that enough? Now, there's a little bit more on Micronesian megaliths here before we get to Baalbek. Megalithic structures in Micronesia reach their most developed form on the islands of Pohnpei. It's a Pohnpei, and Cosrae in the Eastern Caroline Islands. On these two islands, there was extensive use of prismatic basalt columns to build upland building complexes such as those at the Salwok on Pohnpei and Menka on Cosrae. These building sites, remote from the ocean, appear to have been abandoned early, though. Megalithic building then shifted to constructing networks of artificial islands on the coast that supported a multitude of common royal and religious structures. dating the structures is difficult, but the complex at Nan Madol on Pompeii was probably inhabited as early as 800 CA, probably as an artificial island with the more elaborate buildings and religious structures added to the site at about maybe 1000 to 1400 AD. You've got to remember that a lot of the islands around the Pacific suffered some hideous kind of inundation or destruction, and were repopulated again around about 700 years ago. The southern Pacific was not strange to this, or also New Zealand wasn't populated until about 700 years ago as well. You've got to just remember that. So on the timeline, there was some massive event that occurred, right? I mean, totally massive occurred. It could have been a slump on Hawaiian Island. It could have been a meteor strike, and it's predicted that it was probably a meteor strike into the Pacific Ocean, which they haven't found the crater for, and it might have been, it may have occurred and not caused a crater on the bottom, slowing the item down or cavitating the ocean and making a large tsunami that would brush the entire Pacific rim. Okay, so 15 minutes left or there. So Baalbek excavations. That's one of my favourite and Meki's favourite as well. Emperor Wilhelm II of Germany and his wife passed through Baalbek on November 1st, 1898, on his way to Jerusalem. He noted both the magnificence of the Roman remains and the drab condition of the modern settlement. It was expected at the time that the natural disasters, winter frosts, and the raiding of building materials by the residents would shortly ruin the remaining ruins. The archaeological team he dispatched began work within a month, despite finding nothing that they could date prior to Baalbek's Roman occupation. Puchstein and his associates worked until 1904, from 1898, what's that, 6 years, and produced a meticulously researched and thoroughly illustrated series of volumes. Later excavations under the Roman flagstone in the Great Court unearthed 3 skeletons and a fragment of Persian pottery dated to the 6th and 4th centuries BC. The sherd featured cuneiform letters. Wow. In 1977, Jean-Pierre Adam made a brief study suggesting most of the large blocks could have been moved on rollers with machines using capstans and pulley blocks, a process which he theorized could use 512 workers to move a 555-ton stone, or 650 tons block. Baalbek, with its colossal structures, is one of the finest examples of imperial Roman architecture at its apogee. UNESCO reported in making Baalbek's World Heritage Site in 1984. When the committee inscribed the site, it expressed the wish that the protected area include the entire town within the Arab walls, as well as the southwestern extramural quarters between Bastan al-Khan, the Roman site, and Mamluk Mosque of the Ras Al Ain. Lebanon's representative gave assurances that the committee's wish would be honoured. Recent clearing operations at the Temple of Jupiter, or the Jupiter Temple, discovered the deep trench at its edge, whose study pushed back the date of Baalbek's settlement to the PBNB Neolithic, not the Romans. Finds included pottery shards. That's clearly what the word is, shards. Including a spout dating to the early Bronze Age, In the summer of 2014, a team from German Archaeological Institute, led by Jeannie Abdul Masi of the Lebanese University, discovered a sixth, much larger stone suggested to be the world's largest ancient block. The stone was found underneath and next to the stone of the pregnant woman. It's called the Hajar al-Hibla, and measures around 19 metres by 6 metres by 5.5 metres, which is 64 feet by 20 feet by 18 feet. It is estimated to weigh 1,650 tonnes, or 1,820 tonnes. Just one sec while I've obviously kept my cat in this room, and I'm walking away so I can open it up so the cat is going to liberate itself from the room, and there we go. It's liberated itself. I can close the door again. Oh, I thought I had 14 pets. I've only got 13 pets because one of my chickens died over the weekend. Okay, so what was the largest known megalithic block from antiquity revealed at Baalbek? What was it? A new analysis conducted by the German Archaeological Institute at the ancient stone quarry of Baalbek, the ancient Heliopolis in Lebanon, has calculated the size and weight of an enormous megalith and can now conclude that it is the largest known stone block ever carved by human hands. I have to say, I don't agree with the author here. There's no reason to assume that it was humans that carved the block. There isn't. And since we weren't there, we don't know, and all we have is a carved block, we can only assume that it is currently the largest known block ever carved. Let's just say that. Located at an altitude of approximately 1,100 metres, which is about a kilometre, not even a mile above sea level, in the Bequa Valley, Baalbek is known to have been settled from around about 7,000 BC, which is almost continual settlement of the Tell under the Temple of Jupiter, which was a temple since the pre-Hellenistic era. However, some researchers, such as Graham Hancock, argue that its roots go back as many as 12,000 years, and I believe that to be the case as well. Maybe 14,000 years, at least. During a period of Roman rule, Baalbek was known as Heliopolis, the city of the sun, and housed one of the largest and grandest structures in the entire empire. One of the most awe-inspiring features of Baalbek are the incredible megalithic foundations of the Temple of Jupiter. The temple was built on a platform of stones that are among the largest building blocks ever seen in the world. Well, in fact, they are. 27 of these enormous limestone blocks can be seen in its base, with 3 of them weighing 1,000 tons each, known as the trilithon. How they were cut so finely and moved into places defied explanation, particularly considering the blocks are known to have weighed over 1,000 tons. Many researchers, like Graham Hancock included, rejected traditional explanation that the blocks are a work of the Romans, and Mecki and I agree with that research as well. Indeed, a quick glance at the photograph that you've seen, where everyone's standing on the stone that is still at the quarry, clearly shows a difference in the style and the base of the Jupiter temple. That's what the photograph is. Sorry. It clearly shows a difference in style and appearance between the large megalithic stones and the surrounding blocks used to build the temple. So it appears as though the Romans just decided to utilize the current platform that was there to build their own structure on it. I mean, why not? Wouldn't you? I'm seeing who suggested this quote, but there's a quote here. It says, "I do not agree with the mainstream archaeological view that any of the 3 megalithic blocks in the quarry or the enigmatic megalithic foundation of the Temple of Jupiter are works of the Romans," writes Graham Hancock. it continues. I believe these huge megaliths long predate the construction of the Temple of Jupiter and are likely to be 12,000 or more years old. Contemporaneously with the megalithic site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. So he's paralleling the age of both Göbekli Tepe and the Jupiter Temple foundations. I suggest, he says, we are looking at handiwork, or the handiwork of survivors of a lost civilization that the Romans built, and that the Romans built their Temple of Jupiter on a pre-existing 12,000 years old megalithic foundation. Absolutely agree with you. I agree with you, Graham Hancock, and there is no doubt in Meki or my minds that this is the case, and we hope that you also share this insight, because the stones are so large that 1,000 tons is outrageously large, and I had an and, that the Romans were unsuccessful in being able to move something half its size and ended up cutting it, transporting it after they carved some weight out of it, and then it took them years to cart one stone around. So for them to have claimed the ownership of those stones is maybe it's a fraudulent claim by the Romans. Yeah. Well, they're not here right now, and if someone said that joke, what have the Romans done for us lately? They lied to us about them owning or even building the Jupiter Temple foundations. Let's put it that way. I'm typing in through show number 390, because that's coming up next week. There's only a few minutes left. This is 5:51 p.m. on a Sunday. And yes, that means I'm talking to you from the future, and the world hasn't blown up yet. We're not in the grips of a global thermonuclear exchange, though tensions remain high, and also the doomsday clock is at an unprecedented, I think, 2 minutes, to midnight. And, the time that nuclear war would break out, someone moves those hands to midnight. But we would never know, because we would not have survived. Or at least communication to us would not have survived the conflict. So when I was talking earlier that my friend was talking about, a good friend of the show, he's created a go bag, and I suggest that we all do the same. We all have maybe 2 weeks of food per person in a go bag. We research methods of surviving multiple incidences where the go bag would become a viable option, in case the only way that you've planned to be able to traverse the landscape, or stay at home, or go to a boat, or whatever it is not the only method. You try to find multiple paths. That way, that if something happened, it wasn't going to your liking, that you wouldn't have to then think on your feet and try and do something else. You would have the ability to adapt, but have that as a plan, so you're not afraid. Remember, the only thing about fear is it's not real. Your mind has made it up. With a plan, you can eliminate fear and just do. And if you do, then you survive. So think about that. I'm not saying it's going to start tomorrow. I'm not trying to be a doomsdayer. I'm just saying, do you know what? Don't you think it's time? Really? Maybe it is. So, and don't rely on any buried foods you've put anywhere. That's just silly to do that. And if you've done it, I'm sorry. I'm not putting you down. It might be good in your instance, but it's not going to get us anywhere certainly where I live. So having said that, thank you for being with me solo today on the show, and hopefully Meki's back with us next week. He does a lot of traveling in his job, and he can't always find the internet wherever he is. If you'd like to get in contact with Meki or I, you can through any of our platforms. Just look for Shiny Side Out, and the website has our email addresses. You can simply click the link if you've got that as your default sender, and you can talk to us. If you reply to any of our YouTube videos as a comment, we read them all. So feel free to do that if you feel inclined. Otherwise, yeah, join us in the chat room. And if you listen to this on YouTube, there is a chat room, and we can do this live. And you can join in and talk to us while we're on air, which is pretty neat. If you've got an idea, we prefer you talk to us first, and then you can progress to being in contact with us on Skype, and you could do that during the show as well. So good friends of the show usually message me while the show is on. Meki and I communicate with each other while the show is on through Skype as well. And but we have the chat room for public access. Join Jer Bear in the following show, in the show that follows us. He's coming up next. It's usually a round table. He plays some good tunes, and there's a lot of good topics that come by his table. So if he's invited you to dial in, and become part of radio. That's how I started. I actually dialed into Angela, This Blue Monkey, her show, and I dialed in and chatted, spoke my part, and I was offered my own show. And then I called up Meki and said, hey, we've got a platform, let's do this thing. Now, I'm sure the music is just about to start. If it's already started, let me know in the chat room. If he's invited you to dial, it doesn't sound like it has. So please do that. It's the moment you hear the music, because today I can't hear the music at all. What else? Some people have a nice little exit line, like, stay vigilant, or not afraid, or look up. I think the music's just begun. Have a great week. We'll see you next week, and stay safe. Take care, everyone. And good to talk to you too, Lady Horse, by the way. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.